We're ready. Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. I want to welcome our witnesses who are co-chairs of the National Academies of Science panel that conducted a study on these issues. Today's hearing is on peer review design competition and the NNSA National Security Laboratories. This committee has launched this study a few years ago because it wanted an objective, nonpartisan review of these two foundational aspects of our nuclear deterrent. Quoting from the committee report in 2013, quote, "The committee believes that peer review and design competition are critical components of nuclear stockpile stewardship. Because of their importance, the committee believes an independent assessment of it is needed to understand the effectiveness of current practices," close quote. It's clear that without effective peer review and design competition within our nuclear weapons labs, the long-term health and viability of our deterrent is in danger. So we asked the National Academies to review these two issues and give us their assessment. And at the risk of stealing their thunder, our witnesses are reporting that while, quote, "The state of peer review at the weapons labs is healthy and robust, the state of design competition is not. The NNSA complex must engage in robust design competitions in order to exercise the design and production skills that underpin the stockpile stewardship and are necessary to meet evolving threats," close quote. So the report card is mixed, and we need to understand why. More importantly, we need to hear the witnesses' recommendations on what we and the administration should be doing about it. Because at its core, the credibility of our nuclear deterrent rests on the ability of our scientists and engineers to design, build, and field weapons in a timely way. The witnesses state that the nuclear enterprise needs to exercise on a regular, ongoing basis the full suite of nuclear weapons design, development, engineering, and production capabilities needed to respond to the evolving threats. This committee has recently taken some steps in this direction by creating the Stockpile Responsiveness Program and the Foreign Nuclear Weapons Prototyping Program. I'll be curious to hear what the witnesses think of these efforts and what more should be done. Coupled with our Project Atom hearing in November, today's hearing should focus our efforts on preparing for the dynamic and highly uncertain nuclear future. We must ensure our nuclear enterprise is ready to meet the future. With the guidance of our witnesses, I'm confident we can do just that. Thank you for testifying today and leading this study. We know it takes time to do these things, and we very much appreciate this time and effort. Our witnesses today are Dr. Paul Peercy, co-chair National Academies Study Committee that conducted this study, and Dean Emeritus of the College of Engineering at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And Dr. Jill Dahlburg, co-chair of the National Academy Study Committee, and her day job, Dr. Dahlburg, is with the Naval Research Lab, though she is not here in that capacity today. With that, let me turn to the ranking member, my friend and colleague from Tennessee, for any statement he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, congratulations on the victory last night. I stayed up till midnight to see that. It was an amazing game. Second, I would like to ask unanimous consent to insert my opening statement for the record, as well as the testimony of Dr. Garwin and Dr. Schwitters. Unfortunately, they were not able to be here today, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the testimony of the witnesses. These are extremely important questions, and I hope that we can receive the wisdom of the panelists today and do the right thing for the country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman and the witnesses' joint statement will be entered without objection into the record. I would also like to enter into the record the full report of the National Academy Study Committee without objection. That will be submitted as well. We have copies of the report for each of the members and have a few available for others as well. We'll now ask our witnesses to make 5-minute opening statements summarizing their statement. Dr. Peercy, we'll start with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cooper, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the results of our National Academies report, Peer Review and Design Competition in the NNSA National Security Laboratories. My co-chair, Dr. Jill Dahlburg, and I have prepared this joint statement, and I'm going to ask Jill to please chime in at any time during my comments. Our report was released on October 15th, and it's a product of a very strong committee whose members have extensive experience and excellent credentials in this area. The statement of the task given to the National Academies for the study was specified as noted in the FY 2013 National Defense Authorization Act. It charged our committee with assessing the quality and effectiveness of design competition. The charge specified particular dimensions of these assessments, which were carefully addressed in our study and report. The study was supported by the National Nuclear Security Administration, which went out of its way to provide the committee with full information relevant to these tasks. Let me begin with the bottom line, which Chairman Rogers has already noted. The state of peer review at the DOE Weapons Lab is healthy and robust, but the state of design competition is not. The NNSA complex must engage in robust design competition to exercise the design and production skills that underpin the stockpile stewardship and are necessary to meet evolving threats. Recent competitive design studies, such as the Reliable Replacement Warhead, RRW, were useful design and modeling exercises, but were not true design competitions because they did not result in the creation of an engineering prototype, and the latter step is necessary to provide essential feedback on the viability and practicality of a design. Therefore, the committee recommended that to exercise the full set of design skills necessary for an effective nuclear deterrent, the NNSA should develop and conduct the first of what the committee envisions as a series of design competitions that integrate the full end-to-end process from novel design conception through engineering, building, and non-nuclear testing of a prototype. The process should exercise the full range of skills in the complex needed to produce a new weapon. But this should be done with the clear understanding that this prototype would be a nuclear device, not a warhead, and that the prototype would not enter the stockpile. Maintaining nuclear weapon design skills through design competitions is necessary for our nuclear deterrent workforce to be fully capable of designing and building weapons to meet evolving threats. Understanding the status and direction of foreign nuclear weapons programs and determining the best and most cost-effective approaches to resolving problems that arise during stockpile weapon surveillance and life extension programs. It is important to emphasize that the scientists and engineers who designed and built the weapons currently in the stockpile have either retired or soon will retire, and these design and build competitions are essential for training the next generations of weapons designers, for transferring the knowledge from the current generations to future generations, and for maintaining production skills within the NNSA complex. The committee made other recommendations. I would like to bring three of these to your attention. The first, design competition between independent teams that use different approaches and methods are extremely valuable, especially in a system as complex as a nuclear weapon where we do not have comprehensive understanding of the physics. We also gain increased confidence in the safety and reliability of weapons in the stockpiles when they are assessed by independent teams using different approaches and methods. These observations led the committee to recommend that Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories continue to maintain independent design capabilities using different approaches and methods to enable independent peer review of critical technical issues. Sandia National Lab should likewise carry out, for high priority issues, competitive designs with independent teams that use different approaches followed by peer review of components, subsystems, and the full system. Next, while noting that the peer review process is basically healthy, the committee recommended two minor changes to strengthen the peer review process. And finally, the committee recommended steps to be followed in future design competitions to avoid the detrimental aspects of the RRW competition. So thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and we remain at your disposal for questions.
Thank you. Dr. Dahlburg, did you want to summarize your statement?
I would like to. Thank you very
You're
much.
recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay, so I would like to hark back to what Paul said, which is it's important to emphasize the scientists and engineers who designed and built the weapons currently in the stockpile have either retired or soon will retire. And what we need to do is make sure that we have a cadre of people who are going to be able to maintain the stockpile into the indefinite future. I think we all agree as long as we have nuclear weapons, we must be confident in these weapons. The analogy I often think of is like actually cooking. If you want to make something in the kitchen and you're trying to train someone else to make what you're already cooking, you can write down a recipe and they can follow it. If they've never cooked before, the odds are that they're not really going to know how to do it. You can make a video and they can look at it and then try it from that. But the odds are they're not going to have quite the same expertise as if they actually come in the kitchen with you and they learn how to do what you mean by a pinch of salt or by stirring the flour with the butter. And when you train that way, then you have a group of people who are going to be able to do what is necessary at each stage of replacement warheads, at each stage of designs in the future. And I want to emphasize that what we're talking about are prototype devices. The design and fabrication should exercise the full range of skills needed to produce a new weapon. Doesn't mean produce one, it just means you have to make sure that these people know every aspect of what they're doing. The design should be able to be certified in a manner consistent with the testing moratorium. This is absolutely mandatory. The prototype nuclear explosive package should be fully integrated with all of the Sandia components. So it's not just the piece that the Livermore and Los Alamos might work on, but across all of the 3 laboratories. If they require new Sandia electronic components, the prototypes of these components should also be designed and produced in parallel. And it should be a device, not a warhead. That is, stockpile to target type scenarios should be considered via simulation or testing, but there should be no expectation of actually getting something that looks like it's going into the stockpile. And this is, I believe, necessary in order to train that next generation workforce, which is every bit as important for our deterrent as the hardware that they are maintaining. That's my statement.
Great. I appreciate the opening statements. We'll now move into questions. I recognize myself for the first set of questions. Dr. Peercy and Dr. Dahlburg, let's start with the good news you bring to us. Your team found that the peer review is strong, healthy with NNSA labs. So tell us why.
I think it's there because it was built in from the early culture of excellence and a fear of failing, because they did not understand the materials they were using. So they really wanted their designs peer reviewed by others before they put them in the test.
And how did that review? How was that carried out? That peer review.
So that peer review started out being carried out primarily from other scientists in the same laboratory, and then as time passed, and especially after Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories failed on its first 3 tests, the peer review became laboratory to laboratory much more. And in the case of Sandia National Laboratories, a branch was built in Lawrence Livermore, and they reviewed the Albuquerque designs, and the Albuquerque team reviewed the Lawrence Livermore designs. The cultures of those 2 branches were very different. The culture of the Sandia Lab in Livermore took on the culture of Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and the culture of the Sandia Lab in Albuquerque took on the culture of the Los Alamos National Labs. And so that gave purely independent teams designing each other's work. And that's why we recommended that be maintained going forward, especially for high consequence items. And we also recommended that the peer review be codified a bit more. Sandia has written guidelines for what type of peer review when, and we recommended that Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore create their own short written guidelines. Please
Yes,
add.
and actually short is to the point. We don't want this to turn into another process that becomes a time sink, just something that they can explain, because right now they do very informal peer review, peer-to-peer, and it goes higher and higher until finally the lab director's involved. And there should be something of a checklist that says, at the level of uncertainty, this is the kind of peer review that we require.
Good. How do the labs determine what level or types of peer review is required for various programs or projects? And is the process formal, informal, ad hoc, or structured?
So the process has been a bit ad hoc at the nuclear design laboratories, Los Alamos and Livermore. Sandia is a much more formal process, and they continue to formalize it. And Sandia also has, although it does not have a competitor that does the complete end-to-end design of the non-nuclear components for a given weapon, if you look across American industry, every one of those different parts are designed and sold. So those are customers for Sandia, and they're also reviewers of Sandia.
Okay. Is the peer review process strong on the non-nuclear side of the business, given that there's only one lab, Sandia, that's doing non-nuclear?
Yeah, it is strong, and it was made strong partly because some other institutions, like the Department of Defense, use the same products, some of the same products, but also there are competitors in the private sector, and they provide the same products. And so there's competition, not on the complete spectrum from one company, but if you integrate all of the companies, you have the complete spectrum.
Okay. Let's move over to the less than good news side of the news you brought us. The report says your team, quote, is deeply concerned about the state of the design competition in all three laboratories, close quote. It goes on to say that, quote, recent design studies have been good analysis and modeling exercises, but they did not result in the actual engineering and fabrication of components and systems, close quote. Why is this distinction important, and why should the labs be pursuing actual engineering and prototype fabrication with the clear guidance that the weapon would not actually be produced and deployed?
I think the committee thinks that is important because we do not have a complete understanding of the physics of the materials and the processes that go into the weapon. So you look at it, you do the best you can with experiments, but you can't reach all of the experimental region you need, and then you do models and simulation based on that. But you find that the two different labs models give different answers. So the question is, which one is right? Okay. And that's why you do this.
And there are, in addition to the workforce, we need to understand the status and direction of foreign nuclear weapon programs, and we also need to determine the best and most cost-effective approaches to resolving problems that do arise during surveillance and the life extension programs. So these three are the key reasons.
Okay. The report notes that designing and producing prototypes of new nuclear weapons designs will help address evolving threats. Why does conducting modeling or computer simulations not get the job done here, and why do we need to go all the way to full designs and the building of prototypes? Yes. Your mic.
Sorry, it's very clear for the nuclear components why you need to do the prototyping and testing. And
go ahead and explain why.
Pardon?
Go ahead and explain. You said it's obvious.
Oh, okay. Because you don't know if the design's going to work. Right off the bat, you don't know first if it's a viable design that can be built. A lot of the early designs could not be built.
And there's more than that. It's when you're doing a simulation, you're modeling the real world. And there's aspects in that simulation that you made assumptions in many ways. The numerics themselves are assumptions, and the physics packages are also assumptions. So as you go into more and more extreme states of matter, in large cases, you're guessing because you can't have measured every point that you're simulating. Therefore, you have to do some form of validation with physics. And that's why you need to do actual experimentation.
Last thing I want to ask is, why does the report stress that a, quote, clean slate, close quote, design competition, why is that important?
So the committee thinks that's important because you want to stimulate the nuclear engineering package designers to think about how to design a new weapon. And you want to stimulate the Sandia National Labs, who have a lot of work doing life extension programs, to actually think about how they would build the supporting electronics and systems for a different nuclear package. So right now, the life extension programs only look at existing nuclear packages, and that exercise is part of Sandia's expertise, but not all that's needed. And of course, no new nuclear packages are being designed. So Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore need that exercise.
If that clean slate competition were pursued, does the administration 3+2 nuclear stockpile strategy exercise the full range of skills in design competition your study recommends?
We didn't hear much about the 3+2, but from what we heard about the 3+2, it does not exercise the full range, because the 3+2 basically takes existing nuclear packages, or at least the footprint of those, and works around those.
Okay. With that, I yield to the ranking member for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to explore first the degree of unanimity behind the report. First, of your committee members.
So all of the committee members agree with that report.
So no dissenting views, no.
There was no minority views.
Okay.
No
How about
minority
among the
opinion.
reviewers?
Pardon?
How about among the reviewers?
Well, the reviewers had a lot of suggested improvements, which we appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
But the reviewers, some of the reviewers did not fully support the conclusions of the report. I think that's a fair statement.
Yes. But in the end, I think we accommodated all of the reviewer comments in the document that you're holding.
Are we allowed to see the reviewer comments?
No, they are held quiet within the Academies by Academies guidelines.
Okay. So is it fair to say that this is supported by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine?
Yes, absolutely.
So how would you characterize the opinions of scientists who disagree with you, who are members of the Academy?
I don't know. I suspect there are disagreeing opinions. In fact, I know there are two that I just saw this morning that I think you entered into the record. And I think there's a difference of opinion as to whether or not we actually have enough knowledge to design a new weapon if an adversary designs a new weapon and we need to move into a new space that we've not been in without a skilled workforce. And I think there's a big difference of opinion over that. You want to add to that?
Yeah. So that's why I started with my analogy about cooking. It's something that we all know. And my reason for being on this committee was that I truly feel that that workforce is an essential pillar of our nuclear deterrent. So from the perspective of what we wrote this in order to make sure that that workforce was going to continue into the next 30 to 50 years.
Well, I think you're touching on the core issue here, which is really a personnel issue, and especially the sensitive subject of quality of personnel. Some people who are brilliant refuse to work on nuclear weapons at all in any form.
That's right. Some
lose
have,
that talent pool. So we have to make do with those who are willing to do this work, this necessary work. So how do we cope with this? You use a cooking analogy. That's important, and I don't want to cut you off, Dr. Peercy. Go ahead if you'd like. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say that the NNSA is responsible for providing and maintaining the capabilities necessary to sustain a safe, secure, and reliable nuclear weapons stockpile for the nation and its allies. And using her analogy and other analogies, if you don't know how to build a weapon because you've never built one, and you can't even write down the recipes for it on paper,
Well,
how do you know you've got you've maintained the capabilities to sustain that nuclear weapon stockpile for the nation and its allies?
Well, let's be very careful how we speak here, because to say there are no recipes, I think, would be inaccurate. Dr. Dahlgren was saying there is knowledge retention. It's a question of actually doing it, the cooking process, the pinch of salt, the stirring in the butter, whatever the analogy is. In medicine, in residency training, they have each one, treat one, teach one. But here, you're cutting that more finely, because you're talking about a prototype, a nuclear device, not a warhead. But what works is a warhead. So you're stopping short. You want a real-world competition, but then you don't want to actually build anything. So this is a very tricky dividing line here. How do you make it real without it being real? And one element that was completely missing from the report is the State Department aspect, because you're kind of assuming that other nations won't see this as a threat or a problem when there's no input from that sphere. A further question is, we do a lot of forensic work on other things, and we learn a lot from that. And that's not a design competition right there using, that's more of an Olympics than what you're talking about. You're talking about a national competition, not an international Olympic competition. So there are a lot of moving pieces here, but fundamentally these are personnel issues. And personnel issues are very difficult to address.
And so I guess we're both scientists and applied physicists. And so speaking from our personal experience, if you don't actually compare your work with experimentation, you can delude yourself very easily. Now, I recognize, and NNSA has done a marvelous job categorizing the large body of knowledge that exists. This is indeed the case. It's the workforce, and it's our opinion that if we want to maintain that for 30 years, we better have a little bit more hands-on experience. And so...
But you limit the degree of hands-on experience.
Well, for two reasons. One is that we are responding to an NNSA charge. So we spoke within the sphere of the NNSA. So our goal was to make sure that the NNSA complex is entirely addressed. Beyond that, the report did not.
The goal is a safe, secure, and reliable stockpile. It's not pleasing NNSA bureaucrats.
Oh, heavens, no. But it is, but the stockpile, for the stockpile to be, oh, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant is we were addressing a charge that in a report of this nature, the recommendations can only recommend back to NNSA. So we can't go outside of that and recommend to the State Department or to other agencies.
Mm. Would the recommendations have been different if you'd been able to recommend to other agencies? If the leash had been...
We probably would have taken this further. There was discussion among the committee about flight tests, and we did not recommend flight tests for 3 reasons. One reason was we wanted to keep it within the current budget. We didn't want to see a large expense that it has to be put in place. Second reason is that we wanted to make sure we didn't send the wrong signal as to why we were doing this program, and that flight to an adversary, and flight tests might do that. But the third reason is flight tests are in the purview of the Department of Defense and not the Department of Energy, and we were charged within that the NNSA purview.
Mm-hmm. And you don't fear that subcritical testing would have any of those negative implications?
No, I don't fear that subcritical testing would have those, as long as there's no nuclear emissions.
But you put your own blinders on, not wanting to deal with State Department issues or budget issues or DOD issues or...
Well, I think we tried to stay true to the charge. And so the charge itself was to actually address the quality of the peer review, the incentives for peer review, we're done with those. The alternate methods for peer review, we addressed that. And then where design competition is, what's the health and status and what's going to happen to design competition. And so that was what the report was about. If you'd like to charge us to do another report, the same committee would probably have a...
Well,
And Broadnet, we would be happy to do that.
the challenge in life is to get at the truth. No one can ever achieve it completely, but we're trying to
Of course,
model it, and it's very difficult
of course,
because there are a lot of moving parts here.
yes.
But I've overstayed my welcome. I would let the chairman move on. No, Dr. Fleming is here.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Fleming, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to our panel team. Just so I can understand, some of the statements that you make is kind of filled with jargon and kind of vague references, so I want to try to understand. What we have is a stockpile of nuclear weapons, which for the most part were built many years ago. The people who built them, for the most part, probably have retired or died by now. And what I think you're saying is, beyond other things, you want to create a whole nother generation of people who are capable of keeping up the stockpile, overhauling them when necessary, and maybe even someday replacing them if necessary. We're already talking about the modernization of weapons. I remember when I first came to Congress in 2009, getting a lecture on the fact that we were still using what was equivalent to television tube technology in some of our nuclear weapons. Obviously something, I mean, you probably wouldn't find a television repairman today, much less one who could actually fix a TV like that. So I get all of that. That makes a lot of sense. But when you said that you have to test it to validate it, and it makes a lot of sense, how far do you take that? Do you actually do some type of near nuclear reaction or a simulated reaction, or how far do you get along the line to actually validate the accuracy of your studies?
So that's a very good question, because you can do a lot of tests on the components and the subsystems, and then if you want to test the full system, you would take out the warhead, you take out the nuclear package, and put in a dummy package that behaves like the nuclear package but does not have any radioactive material.
Right.
Okay, so that will test the full system.
Right.
And you hopefully can test without any nuclear explosions the nuclear package independently.
So you understand the nuclear trigger and obviously the response of plutonium or whatever that you have in there. So you go all the way up to that point with the various interacting systems, which you have to modernize going forward.
And also the complex itself. So I'll use a completely different build so that I don't get in any trouble. Say you're building a spaceflight instrument, okay? And so you have this instrument and you're going to have to get it to technology ready, TRL level 9, and it's going to go on a satellite. In order to do that, you have to design it. Then you have to make sure that you can procure the parts. You have to work with someone who might build a camera, have to understand the electronics and so on. And in order to do all of this, you have to reach into different places of the space flight hardware community. Similarly with the NNSA, there are many different places that someone who's designing this instrument is going to need to go. And if you don't go as far as a design, you won't be testing that aspect. Do I know the telephone numbers? Can I actually call somebody at the plant and see if they can build this thing? So it's that part of the testing that we're talking about too.
Yeah, so it sounds like to me that you wouldn't be even coming close to violating any sort of test bans or anything like that, because you're not really using directly nuclear material. You're using all the devices up to that point.
That is
I
correct.
presume. So that's important. So the National Nuclear Security Administration's labs are not doing the weapons designs needed for the eventuality to modernize nuclear weapons arsenal. So my question is this: the report states that your study group is deeply concerned about the state of design competition at all 3 laboratories. Would you please elaborate on this concern? What specifically concerns you about this? I know you've touched on it some, but maybe you can encapsulate that.
So I think the concern about the design competition was that we've not really had a design competition for the full weapon since 1992, right? There have been some modeling and simulations, but that doesn't tell you if they're going to work. And then when you look at the non-nuclear parts of the weapon, and Jill touched on this, look at how fast electronics changes, how fast communication changes. I mean, you're not going to be able to buy the components in those weapons that are in there today. You're going to have to design whole new ones. You may not find an industry out there that is building those. Right. Then you've got to build them in-house. And you've got to know what you need, and you've got to have the experts to do it.
Okay, so the advantage of prototyping is you may know all the systems work perfectly, but you don't know if they all work perfectly together. Would that be a fair statement?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, well, I think that answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. We've just been called for votes, but I wanted to just close with one question first before I recognize the ranking member for any closing questions. How does your recommendation for design competition align with the programs this committee has created through legislation in recent years, specifically with the stockpile responsiveness program created by Section 3112 of the FY 2016 NDAA?
I think it is very well aligned. I think the two are quite well aligned. I think your legislation goes further. It goes with the flight tests, but other than that, they're the same.
Would you recommend any modifications to our legislation?
I don't have any.
Great.
No, I think it's very good.
All right. Ranking member, got any more questions?
Do the heads of Los Alamos or Sandia or Lawrence Livermore have the authority today, when they evaluate personnel, to test them and see how good they are at solving problems, including design problems?
I would assume so. Yeah.
So are we really talking about anything new here except an extramural way of formally having a process of competition? Because, you know, in a competition, some people win, some people lose.
I think that the thing new that we're talking about is when you do a design and you don't understand the physics, you don't know if what you've designed will work. And that's the bottom line.
But we have competency testing for physicists, and some are better than others.
That is certainly true.
And presumably lab directors pay and reward those who do a better job.
Sure, but
And they test them with real-world circumstances. They are doing testing today. They're not sitting on their hands.
no, it's true. But that's why we have, I mean, as you know, we have experimental science, because even the best physicists in the world can be surprised by.
But they are testing today
they're
different things.
They're testing the capability of given a problem in which you actually can figure out the physics, you can solve that problem. Now, if I give you a problem which you can't solve it. And that's what we're talking about.
Well, you've confused me, but I'm not being a physicist, I'm somewhat handicapped, but I'll turn that over to the chairman.
Someone who's really handicapped. Listen, thank y'all very much. It's been very helpful. We appreciate your participation. For the members who couldn't be here, they may have some questions. We'll submit to you in writing and then ask that you respond to those in a timely manner if you could. With that, this hearing is adjourned.